This week on the Diaspora Show, we continue with our discussions on investing back in Kenya. And today we speak to one Kenyan who lived in the US for a long time, but decided to go back at home to set up a business. And she shares her experience on what to do and what not to do if you're planning to invest back at home. Welcome. Since the enactment of the new constitution in Kenya in 2010, Kenya has been presented as a new country open for business by government officials and the business community. Between 2012 and 2017, for instance, many government officials and business owners traveled abroad outlining to the diaspora community existing investment opportunities in Kenya, especially following the creation of the county governments.
The investment opportunities which exist for the diaspora are actually the same ones which are in line with Vision 2030. That is, we have 6 priority sectors: tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, ICT BPO, wholesale retail, and financial services. But we like to add that energy is quite an interesting sector that forms part of our infrastructure development. We also have mining sector and also building and construction, which includes the housing sector, a sector that is growing very, very fast in Kenya.
But disappointment is in fact one of the most commonly used words by majority of Kenyans living abroad when they are describing their experiences after trying to invest back at home. Thousands have been frustrated by relatives, friends, and cunning property agents who pledged to assist them in investing in Kenya, only to be ripped of the hard-earned cash.
The products that we have been able to bring on the table right here are products that we have established have got a lot of demand by Kenyans here in the US. One of the products is projects that are already ready to go on the ground. One of them is called Athi Springs Golf Estate, where we have got an entire range of homes for sale right now. It is in Athi River, and the golf estate is targeted for the middle income bracket. It has got plots for sale, quarter-acre plots for sale. It also has got villas, townhouses, and it's a new planned integrated community.
That is the reason why scores of them have turned out today to listen to Njeri's masterclass.
She's a corporate director and business strategist. She's founder and manager and partner of NRBC Inc. She's a founder of Mwananchi. Those of you who began with mwananchi.com as your first email, she founded it. Okay. She's described as one of Kenya's most successful serial entrepreneurs. Njeri has over 2 decades of leadership experience working with both startup and large corporates.
Having lived in the diaspora for many years, Njeri to them not only speaks in their voices, but also represents their hopes and aspirations, having at one point in her life lived and walked in their shoes.
Greetings to you viewers. I'm very happy to be here. It's been a very interesting experience to be present amongst the diasporans after 20 years of being back in Kenya and having left the diaspora to come to Kenya to build, in my own personal view, entities and companies that bring a difference to our country. And I'm very excited also to be part of Vision 2030 because I'm very passionate about the fact that Vision 2030 is something that we Kenyans need to be responsible for, particularly those of us who have been in the diaspora and have studied, engaged with professional encounters in terms of business and how to run businesses and how to have work ethics. So I'm excited to be here, particularly just to give a story about how I actually left the diaspora, went to Kenya, and eventually, after very many trials, started Mwananchi, and then of course left Mwananchi and started Ignite Consulting, and have done a number of things that have been recognized globally, including having worked as a director of the board, as a volunteer for ICANN. ICANN is the Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers. I did that for 2 years, 2 terms by election for about 5.5 years. I also have had the opportunity to be featured on Forbes, and I've had the opportunity also to meet the Pope Francis, most recently in the Vatican, and I'm responsible for a committee that he's put together that's going to focus on sports it's a service to humanity. So I'm very, very excited to be amongst other Kenyans and other diasporans sharing my story about the need to recognize that Africa is open for business, Kenya is open for business, and we need to actually go back and bring the change that we want to see and be part of the influx of investors who are rallying themselves to go and make a cut of the renaissance of Africa. And so I'm glad to be here.
Njeri's presentation is very critical because most of these people are not able to make informed decisions due to lack of sufficient information about the opportune time and appropriate investment opportunities in Kenya. There is therefore high uncertainty for these investors who live thousands of miles away from their motherland.
I'd like to start by saying I used to be a diasporan over 20 years ago. I lived in Dallas, Texas, and I'm back 20 years later, and I'm happy to be back in the diaspora for the last almost 3 years. And this is what I need to say, because I think I'll focus on what I need to say. We are a privileged lot. We have the opportunity to live in the US or in Canada or wherever else we live, and we have the opportunity to learn amazing professional skills and to be experts in our field, whatever that field may be. And I also believe that we have the opportunity, if we're legit, to access the resources that exist in these developed nations. I left the diaspora in 1994. I went back to Kenya, and obviously as a diasporan at that time, I went to Kenya during the time of multi-partisan. The economy was not doing very well, and I remember when I was leaving, people were asking me whether I'm crazy to leave America to go back to Kenya. And in hindsight, I can say that I'm so happy I left, because then I had the opportunity to use the skills I had learned in the time that I was away to do several things, including start Wananchi Online at the time when I did in 1999-2000.
Most of the investment opportunities presented to the diaspora have for a long time been in real estate. Real estate practitioners have argued that the biggest mistake any Kenyan in the diaspora can make is failing to invest in genuine properties when they are most affordable and available, especially in real estate market, which presents solid tangible assets that almost have guaranteed return on investment.
You need to start thinking about where you're sending your money. How do you do that? You identify the areas that you believe you can take risk. You're already taking risk, by the way. You know, most people tell me, oh, but I don't know how to invest, or if I invest, I've invested with people who have not actually made a return on my behalf or have lost the money. You know, there are all those conversations that I've had already within the diaspora. But before you make an investment, there are several things that you must do. One, only invest in businesses that you understand or in people you trust. And a lot of the times, this is what they refer to. When I'm going out to do a fundraising, we are normally asked to go to friends, family, and... Does anyone know who the other category is? Friends, family, and fools. Yeah? And fools. So if you know that that's the theme of looking for friends, family, and fools, then you want to be sure that you're not part of the fool category, isn't it? And how do you avoid that? You avoid that by understanding what you're investing in, by being aware of the type of investor you are. Some of us are high-risk investors, others are medium-risk investors, and others are very low-risk investors. You need to know who you are before you start making the investment. Number two, once you know who you are, you also need to understand the business you're investing in. So there are several things you must ask for before you even make an investment. You must do your own due diligence.
But in today's real estate market, however, as Njeri will argue, it's paramount to work with providers you have total confidence in.
So don't just invest because you've had Njeri show up, give you a fantastic story, without validating her story with some information. So that's the thing. So I think, to me, if you're spending out of 100% of whatever you send home, You really need to change your 100% to 60% to be invested in companies of people you trust, obviously. And if you're not investing in startup companies or companies that are owned by your friends and family, then you want to start making sure that you're investing in stock or other investments that will bring you a return. So that would be my response to you.
Njeri argues that one should carefully cross-check to ensure one only engages companies or businesses that have a track record for delivering their promises. Due diligence should also be done to ensure that the properties presented the desired investment criteria.
You know, this is what I said earlier. A lot of us leave wherever we're coming from in the diaspora. We get into the country, our home country, and we actually have one foot in and the other foot out. I bet you that probably was your situation. You had the option of going back. That's the problem. When you go 100%. You go with the intention that you're not going back. It's the only way. And I've seen this with my aunties and other relatives who have come and left. And they've come many times and left. One particular auntie of mine who lives in Baltimore only came back again at her retirement age, but she had been to Kenya like 3 times and left. And I was watching her and I said, you know, you can't come here with the intention, because you're American or whatever the situation may be, that you have a cushion back home to go to. That's America. If you're coming to Kenya or whatever that country is you're coming back to, you come back 100%. That is what I did. I went home and I knew I was there 100%. And by the way, I did all kinds of odd jobs before I got to where I am today. My first job was my first real job. I won't talk about the other Dukawala stuff that I was doing, but my first real job was actually a non-paid job at Hako Industries. I got in as an intern of sorts, and I had good experience, but I worked there for 2 months with no pay. And then in those 2 months, somebody happened to have been fired in the sales department, and I took over that job, and I had a full-time job at that time. So you must come home with the intention to stay, and you must come home with the intention to invest in yourself and to talk to your friends, family and fools or others to get yourself a job so that you can get yourself into the system. But if you come in with the attitude, oh, I'm from the States, you know, blah, 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 it's great, but it doesn't work in many places, because you still have to learn the nuances of being employed in Kenya. It's not the same.
Njeri argues that in the buying process, never substitute sound legal review. If need be, don't shy away from getting an attorney to review the deed to establish whether the title is clean. Beyond that, Njeri argues, ensure the property you've been promised even exists in the first place.
So I think for me, the right time is the time when you decide that you're going to make a difference and you're going to return back home. That's the right time. The second thing that I'd like to say is that the right time must also be supported by you having the courage to understand what the local nuances are. So indeed, if you've been away for so many years, you then are not in touch. If you're not in touch, it means you need to start visiting Kenya more often, or the home country that you're going back to in the diaspora going into Africa. You need to visit, you need to be engaged, and not just with family, you need to be engaged with your contacts, people you went to school with, people who are doing similar things as yourself. You need to be networked. So again, go back and sign up with memberships and make sure that you're present. So I actually now still live in the diaspora. I've moved out of Kenya 2 years ago, but I'll continue to go to Kenya. Nobody will even notice that I don't live there, because I'm so present, I'm so in their face, that from where they're sitting, I probably am still in the city, because you know how many times you get to see people when you're in the city.
Yeah.
So if you, and again, the world has changed so much. People are actually working from home. People are working based on email and connectivity, based on WhatsApp or even any other mode of communication. So you can actually do a lot if you put your mind to it. You can still be engaged if you put your mind to it, because there's so many ways of engaging. Right now, in one of the working groups for this conference, there's an actual conversation taking place between Government of Kenya procurement, tendering, training. It's happening via Skype. Why? Because it can happen that way, which means even you sitting here in New Jersey or Delaware or wherever you might be in the world, you can actually engage with people in Kenya, as long as you're paying attention to the needs of engagement, the needs of networking, and the needs of being present and available to do business.
Thank you for joining us again on our show, Diaspora Live Show. We hope you enjoyed the show. Join us again next week as we continue with the discussions on investment opportunities in Kenya. See you next week.